If you've seen our mixer overview, you know that you're going to need to learn how to use this in order to make a good recording. So, I've set up a microphone and I've plugged it into input 4 on the back of the console. The first thing we're going to do is make sure that we're on layer A, because this is where our inputs come in. And then we're going to select input 4. Now, I should tell you that input 4 is a channel. And the mixer has a lot of channels. And every channel has a independent fader and has a section here where we can select it. So we're going to pick input 4. Now you can do it here with the select button, or as you maybe noticed, you can also pick it here on this screen. Now that I've selected the channel, I want to start making some adjustments to it. You'll notice I'm talking into this mic that's plugged into input 4, but I only really start to see anything when I hit on it pretty hard. So let's go into it and see it a little more up close.
You're moving faster than I can switch.
Okay, so let's go into this screen and we're going to learn a bit more about how this works. Let's go into the screen. Thank you.
Also, your hand is covering part of it.
Yeah. Okay, so I have got a microphone, and if I tap on it, I can see that the meter is going. So I know that it's hooked up correctly and the wire is in the right place. But when I'm talking, I'm just not seeing a meter over here. So when I've selected this, it initially takes me to this outer screen. And when I go into it, I've got a lot of options. It's important that you don't change these things unless you really know what you're doing. If you don't know what these are, you don't really know what you're doing, so please don't change them. Over here, though, this is where we're going to start. We want to start with the preamp gain. Now, we talked about how this is a dynamic microphone. We need to amplify it because it doesn't have its own built-in amplifier. All right, so what we need to do is amplify this. To do that, we're going to use the gain control. Gain is kind of like a volume control. It's more complicated than that, and we're going to learn more about that as we go. But for now, we're going to treat it as a volume control. So we're going to use gain, this preamp gain, to turn up the volume on this microphone. So I'm going to start slowly and slowly begin to bring this up. Meanwhile, I'm talking into the microphone, and you can see that the meters are starting to climb. How high is high enough? That is a great question. So if I'm doing something consistent, like a voiceover for a tutorial video, I'm going to want to get this pretty close to 0 most of the time. Now, it might be difficult to see on the screen, but there's a mark that says 0 here, and -10, and -20, and -30. So I'm going to set this mic as close as I can on average to this 0 number. If I go too far, it's going to start getting up into this red section, this +10, and then you saw there for a moment. So I want to bring the volume on this channel up slowly until I'm roughly in the 0 area. 1, 2. I want on average to be hitting about 0. You can see that here on this meter, that as I'm talking normally, it's about 0. Now, if I'm doing a lot of dynamic stuff, I'm being crazy, and I'm shouting at the mixer, you saw a light flash. We're going to come back to that in just a second. Or, let's say I turn it up too far. Suddenly, we have lights flashing all over the console. 1, 2, 1, 2. If you see a light that says PK above it and it's flashing, you need to turn something down. That stands for peak, and peaking is bad. So I'm going to bring this back down so the meter is at about 0. So in this case, that means that the gain is about 48 decibels. You can't count on that number to be the right number every time. Every mic and every source is going to be different. So you're going to have to set the gain differently for every channel. Perhaps if you've worked with this mic and this source before, you can get close by remembering the number from last time, but there's no magic gain number that's right for every source. So we want to make sure that this gain is set properly to ensure that we get the most sound and the least amount of noise out of our recordings. It's called signal to noise ratio. And by getting that meter at roughly 0 in a recording situation, we're doing our best to ensure that. Okay, one more thing we should talk about on this screen before we move on. Let's say you've got a source that's really loud and you've got it turned all the way down to 0. And it still is way too loud and you're always getting these peak lights. If you can't turn the gain down any further, but you're still getting peak lights, you're going to want to use pad. And what pad does is it changes the range of the preamp. So here I am talking too loudly, and I'm going to press pad, and suddenly I'm not having a problem with my preamp peaking anymore. I should have turned my gain down first to solve this problem, but I needed to show you what was happening. So it changes the range of the preamp from 0 to 60 to a lower range of -20 to 40. So it takes 20 dB out of your gain. One more thing we should learn before we leave this screen is 48V. Now let me show you what that's for. Okay, so you've noticed I've changed microphones here. This microphone is a different kind of microphone. And if you've checked out our microphone tutorial, you'll know a bit more about it. You'll know that this is a condenser microphone. Now, I haven't changed anything since I switched mics. But if you look at the meters, you'll notice that I'm not getting anything in on this channel anymore. The wire is the same. All I've done is change the mic. I haven't muted anything, but I'm not getting anything. This is where phantom power, or 48V, 48 volts, comes into play. So in order for me to engage this correctly, I want to make sure that I mute the channel before I turn on phantom power. Once I've muted the channel, I'm going to come here, making sure that I still have channel 4 selected. I'm going to come here and I'm going to press and hold this button called 48V. After a few seconds, it turns red, and now you can see that I have meter. I'm getting signal from this microphone. If you're trying to use this microphone and it's not working, you can switch it to a dynamic and see if the cable is good. And if the cable's good, there's a good chance you forgot to turn on phantom power. It's okay. This happens to everybody. But just press and hold, turn on phantom power, and the mic will suddenly start to work. It's important that you mute before you do that. Okay, now that we've mastered the preamp section, make sure to check out our tutorial on EQ.